rider. Oh, sorry. I'm not a trainer. I train my own horses, but I'm not professional. So anything you hear from me is just kind of my own experience and information that I could find on the WDA website. There's so much information there in the rule book and in their guides that they have there. So I hope this kind of inspires you to look there, because you'll find a lot of information there. And almost all of what I have compiled is either like copy and pasted or screenshotted from their materials. So, and just kind of an overview of the Western Dressage Association, they feel like Western Dressage, and I agree, is for any horse, even gaited horses. So you don't have to have a warm blood or anything fancy. You can have a pony, you can have a large draft horse, whatever. You can have a gaited horse. This is meant to kind of further the training of the horse and the strength of the horse and help to sort of improve their gaits. If you go to a show or watch online, you'll see all kinds of horses demonstrated in the sport. The goals of Western Dressage is really to develop a partnership between the athlete to help strengthen the horse within the principles of classical dressage. They have kind of some sort of most important things, which we'll talk about in terms of the actual training principles and the things that Western Dressage emphasizes. But kind of here you can kind of see, according to Western Dressage Association, free-flowing gaits. The horse's head and neck are meant to be relaxed in a natural sort of carriage, which are based on the horse's conformation and not some preconceived notion of what that should look like necessarily. The horse is meant to use his hindquarters and his back to lift the forehand, which is also a principle in traditional dressage, so very familiar for people who are coming from that sport. Straightness is something that is emphasized, and lightness and harmony. Harmony is something particular we'll talk about a little bit later that's important in the Western dressage viewpoints, I guess. The Western dressage, they use a training wheel instead of the training pyramid that's used in classical dressage, and they have sort of like 6 spokes of that wheel: rhythm, suppleness, connection, impulsion, straightness, and collection, to help develop the horse and the rider to improve throughness, harmony, and lightness. We'll just talk very briefly. I meant to cover these principles, but I kind of hope to direct you to a trainer or somebody if you're kind of looking for training exercises and how to develop these things. That's not the point of this presentation. This is just kind of introducing you to these principles if you're not already familiar with them, if you haven't heard the words, and giving you information how to find more information. But in terms of kind of actually training your horse, I hope you rather will find some connection with an instructor or trainer, either in person or virtually, somebody who has familiarity with traditional dressage or classical dressage, or somebody who's familiar with Western dressage should be familiar with these sort of principles and help guide you that way. So like I said, just a very brief overview. Rhythm is sort of the sequence of footfalls of the gait. So in a walk, a 4-beat rhythm, a jog, a 2-beat rhythm, and a lope, a 3-beat rhythm. Suppleness is the range of motion of the joints, the ability to move those freely within the own biomechanics of the horse, which is meant to be sort of improved throughout the horse's training. You can kind of read a little bit more about what they're looking for on your own time. I will share with you the PowerPoint after we're done. Connection is a sort of energy that the horse is created is going from sort of the hindquarters through the horse to the front of the horse, into the mouth or bossal, or I guess if it's not a bit, into the kind of whatever device you're using, I guess, to connect with the horse. They use connection rather than contact because you don't have to use a bit in the Western dressage. So it's a little bit different in sort of the connection aspect compared to traditional dressage. But the same principle, just I guess different words. Impulsion, the desire to move forward freely, to carry themselves. Straightness, that the idea that the horse's shoulders are directly in front of the hind legs, and that we're helping the horse to become more even in their left and right sidedness. Collection and increased bearing of weight on the horse's haunches, lowering the croup, allowing the shoulders more freedom, and developing a more uphill balance. And then just more information on collection, which you can read on your own time, not really meant to kind of read for you. I think you can do that. And then within those principles, so those are kind of the main ideas, the training spokes, I guess, of the Western dressage training model, I guess. The other kind of things that are emphasized in Western dressage is harmony. And this is something that's emphasized in the collective remarks, which is on the back of any test sheet that you read or receive from the Western dressage. So they have a handful of collective remarks. They have 5 collective remarks: gaits, impulsion, the rider's position, and harmony. And we'll talk briefly about those because I think helps gives you an idea for what the overall impression that they're looking for in the horse and the rider in a task like setting. And even if you're not riding, the idea of as you're training your horse, what you should be looking for. So those words should be pretty familiar to you. The only one that's kind of a new concept, harmony, which is not part of the training wheel, but is meant to be kind of developed through the training wheel. Impulsion, again, we already talked about that. It's one of the collective remarks. The position aids of the rider, just the idea of the way that the rider is sitting, and their vertical alignment, the way that they have their elbow to the and their hands in relation to the bit. You can read all that in your own time. Like I said, not meant to do that for you, but these are things that they're looking for in kind of an overall impression in the test, just to familiarize yourself. And then harmony, the idea of a relationship between the horse and the rider appearing as one without resistance, agitation, the horse accepting the bit, performing the movements with ease and with a degree of lightness as well. So this is something that is quite a bit emphasized in the Western dressage, which is a little bit different, and actually has like a double coefficient at the end, and they have like even an award for it. So it's definitely something that is important and is kind of the relationship between the horse and without resistance. And then that was just kind of a brief overview of the training principles, just to kind of familiarize yourself with the terms and the ideas there. Like I said, I hope that you'll kind of seek out additional guidance if you're looking for information about how to actually train your horse. But the rest of the presentation is mostly I'm going to talk a lot about the information you can find in the rule book, what they're looking for, and how to familiarize yourself with that information. So there's so much information in the rule book, which you can find on the USEF website. We'll talk about the acronyms at the end to familiarize yourself if you're not already. But the United States Equestrian Federation, which kind of governs the WDAA, they have on their rule book, they have the Western Dressage rule book on their website, and it's also linked from the WDA website. So there's so much information there on what the gaits are and what they're looking for. So it shouldn't be a surprise in terms of like, there's a whole section on what a walk is, what that should look like for a judge, what you should be training your horse to look like, what a collected jog looks like, what an extended lope looks like, and what kind of you should be training your horse to. They have information, they have diagrams on specific maneuvers, information on sort of maneuvers that I think I see a lot of people have confusion about, like pivot, turn on the haunches, what the difference is and what they're looking for in those particular movements, side pass, which is asked for, and should be familiar if you're coming from a Western background, but maybe not so familiar if you're coming from an English style background. Those kinds of information is all available in the rule book. So anybody who I think is interested in the sport, even if they're not showing, I would really recommend just like going and reading through it on a rainy day and just going through and seeing all the information. And you can reference it again. You can go back to it, and it's free. So a lot of this next information is going to come from that, but just know that that's where you can go. And there's a link here, which you'll get in the slides, to the rule book. So legal equipment, the Western Dressage, they allow quite a bit, but there are still rules about what is and what is not legal. You can ride single or double-handed. You can ride in a snaffle or curb or bosal. You can ride bitless or in a hack, specific types of hackamores. Um, so just kind of demonstrating that in this slide, and the emphasis is on working order equipment over some particular amount of silver or fancy equipment of any kind. It's meant to be kind of working order equipment and in a Western style. So I'll talk a bit more about what they're looking for there. And this is just some more information. So the WDA has an equipment guide, which has additional photos in addition to the rule book information, but has more photographs and details about what is legal and what is not. So these are just some screenshots from that, and I'll have more. In terms of bridle, pretty much any sort of Western style bridle is allowed. You're allowed to use a cavesson, including an English style cavesson, and you can use a bosal or hackamore. You can use a bitless bridle. There are specific details about what's legal there. And most style reins are allowed. I believe there's a specific rule about the way that they can be connected to the bit. Like which is different kind of from an English style. They have to be connected via like a snap or which is a little bit different. Either a snap or like a buckle. They can't be connected, or they could be tied. I think those are kind of the main ways. And you can ride a snaffle, you can ride a curb. Snaffle must be ridden in two hands. A curb bit can be ridden either one or two.
Can I just pop in
Mhm.
there real quick with the equipment? If you have a piece of equipment that you are not sure that fits into one of those categories, and the best
Mhm.
thing to do is to email. Don't post it. You can post it, but then people have 6 million questions or ideas or thoughts on it. Your best bet is to just take your question right to them, and you can email WDA directly, and you can send them a picture of the equipment, and they will get back to you and tell you if that equipment is right or not. Um, because sometimes with the bridle and the reins or even the snaffle bits, sometimes um it's hard to see in the pictures if that fits or not. Um, so it's best to just make sure you check so that you're not eliminated when you go to a show. If you're not sure, make sure that you find out before you go and show at a first show. Schooling shows are different. You're not going to get eliminated there, but they might be able to tell you and say, "Hey, that's not legal if you're going to show in it." But you should always make sure you know before you go. So you can always email them and they'll let you know.
Yes, and if it's something that's like you're questionable or that they say is accepted but maybe not be specified in the rule book, maybe a good idea to print out the email that they said, yep, this is legal. So if there's a question, you have that information. Western saddle, as long as it's a Western style, pretty much anything is okay. You cannot have thigh and knee rolls or any sort of English style, but pretty much anything that's a Western style. It does not have to have a horn, but any sort of Western style saddle is pretty much okay. And bits, most snaffle bits are okay, but you cannot have a wire or twisted wire bit, which I know is, I was actually just talking with somebody not too long ago. It's used very commonly in Western, like traditional classes. So it wasn't something that they were familiar with being illegal in the Western dressage. So no wire, twisted wire, no flat mouthpiece. And you cannot have a half cheek or like English style, I guess, uh, configuration of the sort of cheek pieces. And that's pretty much it. I guess the only other thing I had here was just be aware of what is being labeled as a snaffle bit and what is not. Most curb bits are legal in Western dressage, but just for your own reference of the rules, if it's a snaffle bit, if it does not have any sort of leverage, it's going to have either O-ring, egg butt, full cheek, or D-ring cheek pieces and no other sort of arms or levers. That would be a curb bit and would fall under those rules.
I'm sorry, one more thing to add on the bits. Just a lot of times your bit might be USEF or USDA or one of those approved, but it's not WDA approved. So they're not
Yeah.
always approved by the same organization. So you have to make sure that it's WDA approved. So some of your snaffle bits, like your botchers, am I saying that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That is a
No,
dressage legal, but not Western
but
legal.
not Western dressage. So just make sure that you know that it's legal. And also there are width measurements that you need to know for the rings, on how big the rings can be too. So just be
Yeah.
aware of that when you're looking for bits.
And that's all in their equipment guide. I did not copy and paste that information, but in terms of there's certain size requirements of the mouthpiece and any sort of rings or cheeks that you might have on there. Curb bits, most curb bits are legal. There are specific rules in terms of the height of the port, the length of the shank, and there are very specific rules about curb chain. It must be at least a ½ inch in diameter, which I know people have run into problems in the past. Just something to be aware of because not all curb chains are that wide. Otherwise, most Western curb bits would be legal. And then just sort of random rules that are important to know and a little bit different or unique. Polo wraps are allowed, which is not allowed in classical dressage. You can have any sort of ear cover or fly hood. You can use a whip. You can not use martingales, side reins, tie downs, those kinds of things, which should be familiar to if you're coming from classical dressage. And boots of any kind are not legal. The only thing that would be legal on the horse's leg would be a polo wrap. Pretty much simple attire or fancy, it doesn't really matter too much. You can have Western hat, helmet, any sort of long sleeve shirt with a collar, whatever that looks like for you, trousers, pants, and boots of some form. You are allowed to use tall English boots as long as they would be under chaps or under your pants. They cannot be visible on the outside. It could be a tall boot that's Western style, that would be legal, but not an English style boot because they're trying to make this as a Western sport. You do not have to wear chaps or a necktie or anything like that, but you can. And spurs, you can wear. There are very specific requirements in terms of what is legal or not, and that I would direct you to the rule book. Western dressage is ridden in either a 20 by 60 or 20 by 40 meter arena. The first two levels, so introductory and basic, are allowed to be ridden at shows in a small arena or a large arena. And you'll find that information on the test itself. Anything first level and higher must be ridden in a large arena. I'll kind of point out to you on the next page how to find that information. But to familiarize yourself with the arenas and the extra letters that you encounter when you ride in a large arena, and the dimensions, the sort of familiarizing yourself with how far apart letters are, 12 meters from letter to letter, 6 meters from the end to the first letter, those kinds of things to help with your geometry is going to help you a lot if you decide to show or not, just even helping with your geometry at home. On the tests, you'll find, I kind of point out here on each test has information about the size of the arena that it could be ridden in. So introductory and basic level can be ridden either a small or a large. Level 1 or higher must be ridden in a large. So as you're preparing, if you just like to show or you're showing even for the virtual, those are the size arenas that you must ride the test in.
I we should point out though that most of when you go to shows, check with your shows, schooling shows especially, a lot of times, even though your basic levels are supposed to be in a 20 by 40, the shows might not have a small arena set up, so you'll be riding in a bigger
Yeah.
arena. So just so you know, if you're going to your first show, you should find out if they have a small arena or a big arena, and you should practice in a big arena if they only have a big arena, so that you know when you go to do your test. Because it was for me especially, it was very, um, I practiced in a big arena more than I practiced in a small arena. And when I went to the small arena, I'm like, oh my God, this is really tiny. So it's just something to be aware of if you're practicing in a small arena all the time and then you go and ride in a big arena because that's what the show has. They might not have a small arena for you to show in, and you have to ride in a big arena and your letters are further apart. So you just want to be aware of that before you go and show.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Sarah, can I jump into it's
Go
Nicole?
ahead.
Just so there are rail classes and equitation classes in Western Dressage as well, which I encourage anyone to take part in if you have the chance. Not all shows actually offer those. The equitation classes generally are only in the small arena, but again, the ring size is going to be on the test or in the prize list. And then the rail classes, really, there's a pretty wide variation about how those are held either inside the arena or if there's, a regular arena that's not set up, they might be held in that. So just be aware of that too. Thanks.
And additional information you can find on the test, like Nicole was saying. I'm not as familiar with the equitation tests myself, but they have all the tests have all the information basically that you need there. So we're just pointing out a few specific things. The first is the purpose of the test, which is helpful to know before you ride the test. And it will help give you a guide if you're ready for that test and that level. First, the purpose and the new requirements. Purpose a lot of times talks about what kind of sort of they're looking for at that level in terms of the gaits, in terms of the impulsion, the connection between the horse and rider. And as you go up, they're going to be more specific in terms of what kind of balance, in terms of a level balance or more of an uphill balance and those kinds of things that they're looking for. So that's really helpful to know before, even if you're thinking about going up to a new level or just starting out even and trying to figure out where you start. The purpose is going to give you a lot of information of what the judge overall is looking for in that test. New requirements is sort of in the middle of each test. Anything specifically that's introduced at that level or that particular test and not the test before. So this is introductory level test 1, and so it's a fairly straightforward test. Specific requirements that they have, and that is a 20-meter half circle and a halt for 4 seconds. So maybe at another test, then there might be like a level 1, then they introduce a 15-meter circle or a 10-meter circle, or leg yields, those kinds of things. So it's going to tell you any new requirements that was not required of the test before. That would be sort of a training requirement. So those are helpful information. And then I will direct you to the directives, which is sort of in the middle of the test. You have sort of the what to do. So here in the third movement is between H and C, develop working walk. And then in the directive, it's telling you what the judge is specifically looking for, what kinds of things you should be looking for yourself if you're training that sort of movement or that uh, whatever they're asking for. So this one says they're looking for a willing, smooth transition, balance and bend in the corner, regularity and quality of the walk. That's what you're being judged on, not just the fact that you walked, but those additional parts about the walk. And so those parts I think are sometimes skipped over because we're just trying to memorize the test. We're only looking at the first 2 columns. We really should be looking at the third column to help ourselves understand what exactly we should be training our horse. And then in the middle, you can see I circled the number 2. That's a double coefficient, meaning that particular movement or requirement is worth double or two times. So helpful. Those are things that are often the Western Dressage Association feels are more important in the test that they want to emphasize, or that they feel like the horse that should be focused on in some way. There. So this one is the free walk. That's a double coefficient in this test. And then the collective remarks we briefly touched on earlier, that's the back of the test, which we can't forget about. Those are the additional sort of overall impression and comments and things that you'll receive that are also scored. So those are important to know. Learning the tests, everyone's going to have their own model of way that they learn, but there's so much information out there on the internet, on YouTube. So this first one I found on the YouTube that has, she tells you what the movement is of the, and then sort of draws it, I guess, in this like diagram here. So you can sort of see if you're having a hard time visualizing it or you're having a hard time diagramming it for yourself, you can see how it's drawn. And then watching other people ride the test sometimes I find is very helpful for me to try to understand the flow of them when I'm first learning a new test. Diagramming them yourself, like I said, also whatever it is that works for you, but there's lots of information out there. And then this slide I added in because in the next slide, because it's very confusing for anybody sort of just starting in the sport. What are all these acronyms? So I go over a few of them on this slide and then the next slide. So USEF is United States Equestrian Federation. They're the national governing body for most equestrian sports in the United States. And that includes Western Dressage. So the Western Dressage Association falls under and is regulated by, in some ways, the United States Equestrian Federation. And then the WDAA is the national organization that supports Western Dressage in the United States. And PAWDA, we are an affiliate of WDAA. And we're working just kind of on the state, regional level to help promote Western Dressage and WDAA. So that's kind of that brief overview. And then some other acronyms that you're going to probably hear, just if you're in the community. United States Dressage Federation, so they are not affiliated with WDAA. They're two different entities. They're two different sports, so kind of similar if you were going to do vaulting or if you were going to do dressage, right? Like they're two different sports, even though they have the name dressage in their kind of similar principles, they are different organizations. USDF is not associated with it, but there are all kinds of programs, free, low cost, local programs that you can get involved in through your local organization. And I would highly encourage getting involved in some of those programs. As WDAA is trying to expand their reach in some places, and even in Pennsylvania, there is not a lot of Western Dressage education and information out there. But dressage is based on the same principles in many ways. So getting out the information and learning about the sport and the principles through the USDF or WDAA can be helpful. And then the last acronym here is GMO, which is confusing to people. So group member organization, these are the local affiliates of the United States Dressage Federation. These are not necessarily affiliated with WDAA. They're sort of affiliated with the other arm of dressage, of classical dressage sport. And there are lots of local ones, which I'll put on the next slide, which are in Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, that are local that help support dressage and Western Dressage. So even though these affiliates are not technically affiliated with WDAA, a lot of them offer programs and schooling shows, awards programs that cater to Western Dressage riders. So I'm in Eastern Pennsylvania. The biggest programs in Eastern Pennsylvania are DVCTA, LVDA, and IEO is probably another one, ESDCTA. In Western Pennsylvania, there's WPDA. So there's all these acronyms here, all these GMOs or organizations that are not technically Western Dressage affiliates, but they offer all kinds of programs. I encourage you to get involved in them. They're usually very low cost to get involved and become a member, but they also offer schooling shows and award programs often for Western Dressage riders. I know for a fact that more than a handful of them in Pennsylvania offer these programs as well, which are ways to get you involved. And if a recognized Western Dressage show might be out of your reach, schooling shows which have a judge might most commonly will offer Western Dressage. They might have like an LGRAD or more like traditionally dressage trained judge rather than a Western dressage judge, they're going to get a lot of important, good feedback still. So hopefully that's helpful there. And then here we can kind of show you if needed, but there's all kinds of information on the WDA website of how to find recognized shows, how to find online shows, and how to find information about the World Championship show, which is held every year in Oklahoma. I know a few of our members have been to show there. So the WDA website, they have a list of current events on there. You can sort by live recognized events. You can sort and you can also see the online shows. PAWDA, we are putting on 2 live recognized shows this year, one in April and one in May or June. I forget which one that is. And we offer June. Okay.
Yeah.
We offer several virtual shows as well that are WDA recognized, that you'll have a WDAA judge giving you feedback, and you can get a lot of information. So if you're interested in showing and maybe you're anxious about it, you just want to kind of get your feet wet and get feedback from a judge, an online show is a very good way to start. And there's lots of low-cost online shows. You don't have as much of a barrier to entry. You don't have to drive anywhere. If you don't have a trailer, you can do them at your home, as long as you can set up a either 20 by 40 or 20 by 60 arena, whatever's prescribed, and you can find some way to document the letters. And you can do an online show. So that's that. And then I don't know if we have very many youth on, or any youth on this organization, but if you know a youth or love a youth or have somebody you know who's involved in Western Dressage, there are 2 really awesome youth show programs. There's D4K Dressage for Kids Festival in Socrates every August, which offers Western dressage, not just regular dressage. So riders are put on teams, or if they don't already have a team, they will make up teams to support their riders. And they offer Western dressage classes there. And then the region, I can't read it for some reason. Oh, forget what region I'm in. Region 8. Team Challenge, which used to is now, I don't know where it is this year, but as last year, it says it's at Rosemont Farm in Virginia. That is an awesome program also, that's run by some people that I know from this area, and that also offers a Western dressage classes and program for Western dressage. So they don't have to be dressage riders to do those programs. So if you know or love a youth and they're involved in the sport, those are good ones for them. Schooling shows, we talked about this a little bit briefly at some of the organizations across Pennsylvania that offers Western dressage tests. You can find information on those programs if you kind of look up these the local organization near you. And then some information about how to get awards. So PAWDA, we have our own award program, which you can find on our website. We have High Point awards every year that we give out at every level and division, from introductory level through level 5, amateur, junior, and open divisions, musical freestyle, and the equitation class. And then WDAA has their own awards program, which you can find more information on their website. And now they have a High Point program as well that they're just starting this year if you ride in recognized shows. And then, like we talked about a little bit earlier, a lot of the USDF group member organizations have award programs. So here in my area, Lehigh Valley Dressage Association, LVDA, has a Western Dressage Award program. Find you more information. We talked about this. You can go on the Western Dressage website. For junior members, they have a free video ride a test program where youth can submit tests to be judged and commented on by Western Dressage judges, which is awesome. So again, another way to support youth riders. They have an annual judges seminar, which I think this year is in Denver, Colorado in February. You can either attend that to audit, or you can watch it online. and they have more information on their, like they have some online programs that you can watch on their website as well. If you log in, if you're a member, you can log into their website and get access to that. Pennsylvania Western Dressage Association. So this is our program. We have an awards program, like we talked about, the High Point program. We have a medal program. So as you earn scores at designated levels, as you go up the levels, you can earn sort of rider achievement levels. Starting at the most, so our bronze level program, which starts at introductory and basic level tests, going up to our gold, which goes to level 4 and 5. And then shows, we have virtual and in person, which we talked about. And then we're trying to do as much education as we can, which is within the fact that we are all volunteers, trying to do our best. But we try to give education through our newsletter and website, and some of these online seminars, which we have another one coming up in the end of the month on musical freestyle. You can find information on our website there. That's all I have.
Sarah, you have a question in the comments about contact. I don't know if you can go to the chat there, or do you want me to read it?
Oh, I see. Okay, so can we chat about the amount of contact required? I'm in Tennessee. Most judges I've scribed for want the same connection.
Somebody answered.
Yeah, I added the comments in
Okay.
there about connection, which is more of the term that, you know, Western Dressage uses. But, you know, maybe Lauren or somebody can jump in as well, because it is confusing. I put down there too, I used to ride in a Bosal and, you know, used to get comments above the bit, which there is no bit, but but they were trying to speak to the level of connection or contact. And so it is a little confusing.
Yeah, does the person that posted that question have additional comments in response to that?
Here, Lauren, I can read it for you.
I read it,
Oh,
I
you
saw
got
it.
it? Oh, you did.
Yeah, because I think, you know, when we're connection and contacts are different things. And so the contact you would have on a curb bit is not going to be the same as the contact you'd have on a snaffle. And they could just be talking about if someone says inconsistent in connection. It also depends on the context of the comment. And I would have some additional questions about the context of the comment, because inconsistent in the connection is saying, you know, the horse isn't really balancing over the hind leg. The horse is sort of teeter-tottering between balance in the front and the back, and that can manifest in many different ways. But if the person that posted that question has more comments about it, I'm interested in answering the questions.
They said that helps.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Sorry, I
you.
missed that. Thank you for the question, Amanda. Or I guess.
You know what, can we also talk about showing open and amateur? So that
Yeah.
people understand that.
So my first recommendation is to read the rule book, so that you know. And are you talking about amateur versus open at a schooling show or a recognized show?
I guess both.
Okay.
Or, you know, like, because it's confusing to somebody who's never shown before going to their first show and thinking that they have to be an amateur when you can show open, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Does that make
So a professional or open rider are terms that can be used synonymously in the competition world. And an open rider or a professional rider means that person receives money, or it can also be bartering or like an exchange of goods and services for riding, teaching, or coaching. The definition has more within that. So that is an open or a professional in the competition sphere. Services in the equine industry that do not designate a rider as an open or professional rider where the person can still maintain their amateur status are things like boarding, judging, professional services. For example, our veterinarians, our chiropractors, the people that float our teeth, our farriers. They are not professional or open riders. They are professionals within the industry. But really, it's receiving money or like an approximate equivalent, a payment in some form for riding, teaching, coaching. That is what really designates, even if, so some of the argument, and maybe our country has room to develop this further, but this is currently where we are, and we've been here for a while. Even if you say my program is really only beginner riders, it's still you're getting money for that service. Does that sound okay, Kim?
Yeah, yeah. And also, so when you go to your, if you've never shown before and you're going to first show, you can show open.
Oh, yes. So as an amateur, you can ride in the open division, but as an open rider, you cannot ride in the amateur division.
There you go. That's what I was going on. So
Okay.
if you wanted to show as an amateur, you would have to get an amateur card from USEF. Or there's another way, isn't there?
No, that's the way. And it really just when you sign up, so these are for your people that want to become recognized riders. When you
Right.
join USEF, you declare like what your status is. And you can declare like you're an amateur. You really just have to like take this step down if you're an open rider that wants to give up your professional card. But those things, I think, especially with people considering coming into the discipline, know that just you can have personal conversations if you need to understand the difference. So for example, where you might want to be an amateur riding in an open division is for our riders going to the world show so that they can do the same class more than once. Just know that in the open division, there's likely to be more competition.
Right. Yeah. But at schooling shows you can ride. They're all open.
Yeah,
Or actually,
depending, yeah,
show.
right.
Yeah.
Depending on how the series runs it, and on it, most of the shows are going to vary it based in some capacity off of who is sanctioning their schooling shows, like for year-end awards.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
And for PAWDA, for our program, the riders are allowed to submit to the division, whether they're submitting to the amateur division or the open division. So we just accept the score in the test, and the riders indicate to us what division they're applying for the year-end award for.
Okay.
I
That
think for WDAA's new end of year points program, I went and checked because I had questions about this, but you have to show, so the tests have to, that you submit, you also have to declare, whether you're amateur or open, but the tests themselves have to be either or. If you're going to be submitting for a year end, and I'm not even sure you have to submit. I think it's just they look at everybody. Not quite sure how that program's gonna work out. This is the first year that they're doing it, but I'm interested to see. But I'm pretty sure you can't use like say I want to be in for open high point if you're riding amateur tests. I think they only look at one or the other.
Yeah, I would not expect, if you're declared an amateur with the federation, they will track your year-end awards the way you're declared in the National Federation. So WDAA, if you're an amateur with WDAA, it's going to be year-end for amateur. I think that could get very convoluted very quickly, and it would be really hard to prove who is what status if you're switching that much.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
There's one in the chat there.
That's a good one. Okay, so are you, Winter, are you a WDAA member?
I'm just gonna ask the question or repeat the question for people who can't see this. So
Okay.
the Winter said, I've done a couple local schooling shows with LVDA, considering doing a recognized show. Curious what I should know before making the step up.
Okay. So because you're a WDAA member, that helps. It will make it easier. So I think also considering, is it a WDAA light show or full recognized? Because that will also be an indicator of whether or not you have to be a member of USEF. Are you a member of USEF? Okay. Okay. So that I would look into what the recognized show is sanctioned. And this is a side note, but Joan has another question. Can we find our 2 recognized show dates / locations on our website right now?
Yes, I'll copy and paste it into the chat information.
Thank you, Sarah. So Sarah's going to put that in there, and then we can also talk about what kind of shows those are. So that will indicate what federations you need to be a member of, Winter, before going. But I
So
would say apart from that, you really, you want to make sure your clothing is legal, because at some of the LVDA shows, you may have gotten by with things that aren't completely legal. Like you should have a shirt with a collar, and I would recommend wearing a scarf. For sure, cowboy boots, jeans, like trying to make sure you're Western in appearance. So do you feel like, oh, great, okay, be doing one of the PAWDA shows. Is your outfit legal as far as you know? Good. Okay.
yeah,
And
it's legal. Yeah.
how about your tack? Okay. So that's good. And then I think if your tack and clothing is legal, and it's just figuring out if you need to be a member of USEF or not. But beyond that, the show will run very similar to how your LVDA shows have run. I would just sort of use your show prep the same as you do for the other shows that you've done. And I wouldn't say you need to worry a ton about it. Honestly, in a lot of ways, it might feel more relaxed to you than some of the GMO shows that run both disciplines. In my opinion, most of the Western dressage shows have been a bit more laid back overall.
And helpful information. So both the PAWDA shows are considered WDAA schooling shows. By that, they are not USEF recognized. So you do not have to have USEF card or membership to attend them. You only have to be a member of WDAA. Why that matters? So if you're going for like and horse of the year and things like that through USEF, you will not get extra like points through the extra points basically through these shows. They will only count for work. They will count for WDAA awards in year end. They are WDAA recognized shows. So they will count toward, Joan, I saw your question about do they count for qualifying for World Show? They do, but they are not USEF recognized. So that if you do the WDA points program or you're trying to do a USEF Horse of the Year program, they would not count. They would count toward any sort of the PAWDA program. So our year-end awards, we have both schooling show program for High Point Awards, which is meant for those shows that are not WDA recognized. So if you're going to a local GMO show, so like the LVDA or other show where they might not have a Western dressage judge, and we have a recognized show program. So if you're doing online shows, you're doing the PAWDA shows, you can get programs through that. Our medal program accepts awards from any show that you go to, as long as it's within sort of a basic requirement. So those are kind of the PAWDA shows. You will not need additional memberships besides the WDAA. The actual show itself is pretty much, like Lauren said, the same or even more relaxed maybe than a schooling show that you may have gone to.
Can we go back to Barb Sullivan's question? Do you need to have an amateur card through USEF this year, or is it okay to self-certify like 2024 that you are an amateur? Barb, are you asking in reference to going to recognized WDAA shows, or just like the shows PAWDA's running, the light shows?
Either or.
Either or. If you're just doing the light shows, are you currently a USEF member?
No.
No. So it's, I guess I need to clarify.
Our
Sh-
shows you don't need it for.
Yeah, she'd be okay.
But if you're going to, like, if there's another WDA, that's you're saying light, Lauren, and I think it's the USEF light shows with
Yeah.
WDA that you need to have your amateur card and be a member of USEF because you need the horse number.
Okay, thank you.
The PAWDA shows you would not need
Yeah,
that.
you don't need a horse number for ours.
Thanks, guys.
Emily said even as an amateur.
Yeah, that was my
Yes.
question, was like, so if you're just doing PAWDA, and you're
Okay.
not doing rated WDAA, you would not need a USEF card to state you're an amateur.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, so just PAWDA, it would just be the PAWDA membership and the WDAA membership.
Yep.
Okay.
And the PAWDA shows, it's very confusing, and I don't, because the PAWDA shows that we're doing in the summer or spring are still WDA recognized, but they're not USEF additionally recognized. And because of that, you don't have to have any USEF membership or horse membership or anything like that. But you will see shows advertised. I know last year there were a few shows in New Jersey that were USEF additionally recognized. They were USEF light and such. And those you do have to have that information, but it tells you in the prize list.
Yeah.
It's very confusing. So if you don't know, just ask.
If you don't know, I would call whichever show you're interested in participating in and ask them specifically. But there are a lot of options where you don't have to join USEF, including the World Show. Do the virtual shows accrue to year-end awards or qualifications?
Yes.
And Sarah, go extrapolate on that a little bit more.
So our High Point program, we have a specific division for any sort of WDA recognized show, whether that is virtual or in person. So if you do a handful of online shows, or you do a couple online shows and you do a PAWDA in-person show and you submit your scores, then that can count for the recognized division. I think you have to have 3 scores per level for recognized. For schooling shows, you have to have 5. Those scores can count, because we know that there's not a whole lot of Western dressage shows in the area, especially depending on your area, in certain areas of the country. And we have members actually, and not even just in Pennsylvania. So you can show virtually, you can show even at, like I said, if you show at a schooling show that does not have a Western dressage judge, as long as it meets other specific criteria, we can still take those scores.
Sorry, I want to redirect back to Barb Sullivan's question. There is an exception to when you would need the USEF amateur card. If at a bigger show, for example, the World Show, you want to ride in the open division, they are requiring the USEF amateur card. Even though you can go to the World Show and not be a USEF member, You only need the amateur card if you are an amateur or declared as an amateur through WDAA, and you would like to also additionally ride in the open division. They are requiring the amateur card. I think that's the only big show I know of that is requiring that right now. Kim, is that more of what you were talking about with that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The only reason, I mean, the reason I got it when I first started showing is because when I went to register, because I didn't know any of this when I started. So this is, I, but when I first started, I didn't realize there was a difference between amateur and that. I thought I absolutely needed an amateur card. So I've had it since I started showing. But really, then it was like, I didn't want to compete with open riders that were trainers. So
Right.
therefore, the amateur card was the reason I wanted, when I went to Worlds, I wanted to make sure I was only competing with amateurs and not competing with open riders.
Right.
Yeah.
Good questions, everyone. Any more? I appreciate them. And if anyone wants to unmute and talk, please do so.
Does anyone have questions about levels, or if you're coming from a different discipline, like where you would start out, or questions about, your horse's ability and yourself?
What would you say might be the equivalent to classical, like training level test 1 versus the Western dressage?
I would say basic. I'd have to review basic 1 versus basic 2, but in general, I like basic 2 a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
But you will jog and lope. The
Mhm.
thing about training 1 in dressage is you don't have the stretchy trot. The Western dressage wants to see more of the stretching across the top line, I would say, kind of in general. Let me pull up those tests real quick and I can answer that for you more definitively. Give me just a moment, okay?
Thank you.
Another big difference in classical versus Western dressage is there's 4 tests per level. So that might be a little bit different if you're coming from like classical dressage as well.
Classical only has 3, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I think training level 3 is really the same as basic 3. I think.
Yeah, it is pretty similar test, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that test is really similar.
No, basic 3 is the one with all the teardrops. Training level test 3 has the
Oh.
shallow loop serpentines. Basic 3, just for anyone interested in basic level, really sets the horses up nicely. Because you do all those 10-meter half circles with that modified oblique line back, and the horses really just settle in nicely to that. Basic 1 does
Yeah.
have the stretch trot.
The basic 4 has the loops through X.
Yes.
So does basic 2.
Basic 2 is my least favorite. While
Basic.
she's looking those up and before everyone starts getting off, because I know some people have already gotten off the webinar. But January 28th, we'll be having one on freestyles, how to do your own musical freestyles. So if you're free on the 28th at 7:30, join us for that one. And we'll have some good information about how to start your own freestyle.
I can share the link in the chat. If you're a member of PAWDA, that registration is free. If you're not a member, it's $10 just to help support our administrative costs with the organization. So, for the musical freestyle one, I just put the registration link. After you register, you'll get the Zoom link, and I usually send it out like the same day as well.
Basic one is the one most like training one. It does have the free jog in it, but you kind of do your jog circle, your lope circle,
Okay, so,
and you change direction a little differently, but I think you'll like it.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a question on the musical freestyle. Do you have to have over a 60% or over a 65% in order to compete at that level?
No, not in Western Dressage.
Okay, okay, so you can just
Oh,
do the
The
freestyle.
only, the only, the only way, the only number you need is if you're gonna compete at Worlds, you would need to complete, you would need what is it, 63 at basic and intro and 65 at level 1 and up if you're going to Worlds, but other than that, there's no set number for freestyles.
Yeah, correct. Lynn, there's no minimum score requirement in a compulsory test to ride a freestyle in Western Dressage.
Okay, great, thank you.
Another benefit too. Did Sarah also mention you are allowed to talk to your horses in Western Dressage?
Oh, I
That's
did
kind of my
not.
favorite rule.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Yes, yeah.
Yes,
And
that's
you can
great.
be, not coach, but you can be read the test at any
Oh,
show.
any level.
So I still recommend you should know the test because readers make mistakes as well. But if even at the World Show, you can have a reader. At virtual shows, at any sort of recognized show, you can have a reader.
I also found out at the upper levels, you only have to sit the collected jog. You don't have to sit the mediums or the lengthenings.
Correct, Emily. That's a very good
Yes.
point. And
Mhm.
really above level 1, they still call for lengthenings, even into like level 3, level 4. They're still just calling for lengthenings. So you can post that giant trot.
Yes, I just found that out. So now I'm willing to try something harder because my back thinks that I don't have to sit.
That's awesome.
That's funny. I try not to post, so
Not
Well-
that you would want to mix it up, but if you did post and sit in the same Western test, would that be points off? Would those be penalty points?
No, not unless you're doing a collected jog, then part of the requirement is that you're sitting. But if it's a working jog,
Just a working
a
job.
free jog, or a lengthened jog, you may intermix sitting and posting, and it is not judged.
Okay.
Now, if in the process of doing that, you impact your tempo, that could be evaluated, but that's a separate issue, right?
Sure. Okay, absolutely. Yep. But not an illegal act to intermingle them. You just better do it well.
Not at
Correct.
all.
Okay. Thanks again.
That's a good question too.
yeah.
Yeah, Emily, that's a great point. That one.
I was
That's
so
sort of another
excited
diff.
because that's what was limiting me from trying hard, higher levels was sitting a lengthened trot. And I'm like, wait, you don't have to. It just says collected. I'm like, oh,
You're like, okay, this is
I'm like, I can do that. My back will be very happy not having to sit a lengthening.
right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your participation and your questions. And I think there's like ways to contact those of us on the board on the website, and we hope to see you all on center line, and hopefully we'll see you at the freestyle seminar too.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sarah.
Yep. Thank
Yeah,
you all.
good job, Sarah.
All right, let's see.